more missing and even more returning to their homes to find total devastation. Many of these survivors in shock at the sheer devastation.
It happened so quickly. You know, we had trained for this for years and years and years. We knew Paradise would burn. You know, it wasn't, is it going to burn? It's just a matter of time. You know, when will it burn and how bad will it burn? And this is beyond, any comprehension.
Meanwhile, another fire has erupted in the San Bernardino area. We will have much more coming up on this throughout the hour. But first, more election drama unfolding in Florida. Recount machines breaking down, overheating as two races are still undecided, and a deadline hangs in the balance. Welcome to a brand new hour of America's Newsroom. I'm Sandra Smith.
Nice to see you, Smitty.
Good to see you, Hemmer.
I'm Bill Hemmer. Good morning. Election officials in Palm Beach County blaming old equipment overheating. When the counts were compared to the number of ballots, the totals did not match. So they have some inaccurate results, forcing a second recount of many early voting ballots. Is going to be a process, folks. Meanwhile, the state is looking into whether or not there is any evidence of fraud. Here's Pam Bondi on that.
That they have seen evidence of fraud, call that in. We are clearly doing an investigation. We have made no conclusions, but this is about the integrity of our election process, and wherever it leads, we want to be sure that voters know that our process is going to be fair and legal.
Doug McElway live in Tallahassee picks up the story from there. How we doing, Doug? Where are we today? Good morning.
Doing great, but we're in Tallahassee, and as of this morning, there are 7 lawsuits related to the recount headed to this courthouse behind me. And in the words of the local newspaper, the Tallahassee Democrat, quote, all of them are landing on the desk of Chief Judge Mark Walker, who has ruled against Governor Scott several times in astringent, colorfully worded opinions. The hearing that we are closely watching today is set for 1 p.m. In it, lawyers for Senator Nelson are challenging what they believe is a highly subjective signature matching process. So subjective and random, they say, that it threatens the disenfranchisement of thousands of Florida voters. Now, Judge Walker has subpoenaed the local head of elections here in Leon County, then in the Tallahassee area, to determine what kind of criteria he uses to determine voter and signature mismatches. Now, one thing to keep in mind as all of these election lawyers descend on Tallahassee and Broward and Palm Beach counties is to remember that they are not here to ferret out the truth. They are here to ferret out, quote, their truth. And listen to Senator Marco Rubio about that now.
The election lawyers are not coming to Florida to make sure every vote is counted. The reason why election lawyers get involved is to make sure as many votes as possible for their client is counted and as many votes as possible for their opponent is disqualified.
State Attorney General Pam Bondi argues that's why these election supervisors in Palm Beach and Broward County need to be held very strictly and legally accountable.
I, of course, will not go into any details about the criminal investigation, but I felt very strongly in my independent authority as chief legal officer and law enforcement officer for the state of Florida that we had to get the Florida Department of Law Enforcement involved in this.
Last night, the head of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, Rick Swearingen, responded to Bondi's earlier criticism of him that he was standing idly by in the face of all these massive irregularities and potential fraud. He wrote, and I quote, I'm deeply troubled that you think I have announced the FDLE would not be pursuing any investigation or inquiry into the conduct of elections officials in Broward and Palm Beach counties. We continue to work closely in the review and vetting of any complaint associated with Florida's election. And lastly, Governor Rick Scott is in Washington this morning. He is participating in the Senate GOP election, supervisory elections up there. He is behaving very much like he is a senator-elect. Moving straight ahead. And that's it from Tallahassee. Back to you.
Thank you, Doug. Doug McElway there in the Floridian capital.
Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, as Doug just mentioned, lawmakers back to work as leadership roles are starting to take shape and freshmen are getting oriented. Last hour, we saw new incoming Republican senators meeting with Mitch McConnell in his office. In about an hour, they'll be holding a news conference. So we'll look for that. In the House, Speaker Paul Ryan planning his departure, while Nancy Pelosi is plotting her possible return to replace him. Mike Emanuel joins us live with what changes we may see on both sides of the aisle. Mike, good morning.
Sandra, good morning to you. Senate Republicans are finalizing their leadership for the new Congress. Mitch McConnell is expected to continue as the majority leader. John Cornyn is term limited, so John Thune of South Dakota is expected to step up to be the new Republican whip. Wyoming's John Barrasso will advance to become the new chairman of the Senate Republican Conference, and Missouri's Roy Blunt will jump up to chairman of the Republican Policy Committee. Then Iowa's Joni Ernst and Nebraska's Deb Fischer are competing for vice chair of the GOP conference. Some sources suggest Fischer likely has the edge since she was just reelected. I spoke to Thune about stepping into a critical role.
Obviously, the whip in the Senate, you try and make sure that you win votes. And so my job is to try and work with our members, make sure they have the information that they need when the vote comes, and presumably if they're undecided, to try and persuade them to stay with the team. But it's really about helping the team succeed.
Later today, House Republicans will sort out their leadership, with California's Kevin McCarthy facing Ohio's Jim Jordan to be the next House Republican leader. That vote expected this afternoon. Nancy Pelosi is eager to become the House Speaker again. It's worth noting a number of newly elected Democrats campaigned against supporting her. A newly elected Texas Democrat explained to us why she's a yes on Pelosi.
She's an incredibly strong leader. She shepherded through the Affordable Care Act when many people thought it couldn't happen. We need that kind of strength right now. I think it's a job for a woman.
A source familiar tells Fox that Chuck Schumer was just reelected Senate Democratic leader by acclamation. Sandra?
Mike Emanuel on Capitol Hill. Thank you.
Want to bring in America's A-team. It's a good one. Brad Blakeman, former Deputy Assistant to President George W. Bush. Richard Fowler, Fox News contributor. And Tim Carney, commentary editor of the Washington Examiner. It's a good one, Smitty, right? So Democrats in the House have formed the Problem Solvers Caucus. And apparently they're not real fans of Nancy Pelosi being Speaker. This is our Problem Solver Caucus. So solve the problems of Broward County. As of Saturday, 714,859 ballots cast, not to include overseas or additional military ballots that come in from the U.S. military. That's your baseline, Brad, 714,000.
This is third world. 18 years, and we still haven't gotten it right. What happens in Florida? 67 counties, the same two culprits, Broward and Palm Beach County. What Doug McKelway said is the key to this thing. When elections become subjective, the Chads of 2000 are the provisional ballots today. When somebody can infer somebody's intent to vote, the system doesn't work. It doesn't work for Republicans, and it doesn't work for Democrats.
Ultimately, that's where the U.S. Supreme Court came down.
Exactly.
Richard.
This goes far beyond just provisional ballots. We're talking about ballots from our troops abroad who haven't been counted yet. Now, one of the reasons why some of these votes haven't been counted has everything to do with a couple weeks ago. Remember the story about the Miami bomber and the Opelika sorting plant, right? That plant was shut down. Some of those absentee ballots got caught in that plant. That's why they didn't get to Palm Beach. They didn't get to Broward County. They were postmarked on time, didn't get there. They deserve to be counted. And this ideal that we say to Floridians to go out and vote, and every vote should be counted, and that we're only going to, well, we don't have enough time to count these votes. It's an untenable idea.
Does it bother you that 65 counties got it right and seem to be doing okay? And Brad's point is that too.
I think Broward County, Miami-Dade County, Palm Beach are the most populous 3 counties in the state of Florida. And once again, like I said, the ideal that we won't count every vote is against our democracy, and it's against the American law.
Miami-Dade is larger than Broward and Palm Beach. They met the deadline that the law, in fact, requires. Now, we can't ignore the fact that
those are arbitrary deadlines.
Repeatedly and blatantly, though, she violated the deadline. Snipes down in Broward not even reporting the number of votes she had, not even reporting sort of, I know this and I don't know this. But actually, I agree with you on one point. I don't think Republicans should rush it. I think they should say, look, take the time to count every vote. We're going to keep an eye to make sure that she stops throwing in illegitimate votes. I think the lead's insurmountable, and I think that it's the right thing to do to count every vote. And yeah, the Republicans will still win.
Let's hear from Brenda Snipes.
In this office, our primary customer is the voter. And that's who we work for. And that's why we work the hours that we work. Not ever since I've been here has a person refused to do the jobs that they are assigned or that are associated with that position.
She's incompetent at best. and worse is there's criminal activity, and that's why there's an investigation. The fact is the courts have determined she has not followed the law. She has violated the Constitution of the state. As Bill pointed out, 65 counties got it right, and the same 2 culprits got it wrong. Now their machines have broken down, and they're calling in mechanics. This is not the way things should be. And let's see if they learn their lesson finally in developing a system that actually works for the people of Florida.
So let me just say this. So
it's got to bother you a little bit, huh, Richard?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the machine
What's
shouldn't
the rub 18 years later?
The machine shouldn't have broken down, but they're actually following the law. The law says,
no, they have not followed
the law says if there's a 0.5, that there should be a machine recount. That is what is happening in the Senate race. We're at 0.25, which means you go to a hand ballot recount, which is exactly where
I know
we
what the law says. I'm talking about how you get to those numbers.
Right.
She has not done her job.
The only law that, according to the judge, the only law that Brenda Snipes has violated was the law that she violated the Freedom of Information Act. She didn't say actually how many ballots there were. No, period. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement indicated there was no voter fraud.
Gentlemen,
this idea of voter fraud is a farce.
Figure it out. We're not going to figure out. But there's a breaking news on the Hill. Chuck Schumer has been reelected Senate Minority Leader on the Senate side, and we're going to see Mitch McConnell in leadership about 11 a.m. Eastern Time. With that, McConnell wrote a piece, Tim, at FoxNews.com. Here's the headline. He writes, "Will Dems work with us or simply put partisan politics ahead of the country?" What's the answer?
Well, so the great irony is that Mitch McConnell is the one who discovered that opposing the other party is good politically. I think the Democrats, especially in the Senate, where every Democrat is running for president, I think, with maybe a couple of exceptions.
Maybe half.
Yeah. So half of them are running for president. They have nothing to gain from giving Trump a victory on anything, even if they support it, even if it were an infrastructure bill with no wall funding in it. If Trump gets a bill signing, that hurts the Democrats running for president. In the Senate, there is zero incentive for them to go along with McConnell. And McConnell, of all people, I think knows that.
In that piece, Richard, McConnell writes, last week, the American people made it abundantly clear that they prefer that Congress focus on making a difference. That message may have been lost on a few House Dems who have made clear their preference for investigations over policy results. Is that the case?
Well, I think Tim is right. I mean, Mitch McConnell hypocrisy is the best word you come up with, right? Mitch McConnell ran on his whole platform was, I'm going to make sure that Barack Obama is a one-term president. But with that being said, I think Mitch McConnell read the election wrong. 70% of Americans, all voters, said the number one issue is health care. And I think Democrats are going with an agenda to fix that. And in that issue is pre-existing conditions. If Republicans are willing to work with us to fix that, we will do it. 70 million more voters voted for Democratic congressional people over Republicans. If Republicans are willing to work with us on infrastructure, we will work with them. Here are the economic headwinds. The economic headwinds say that the cost of borrowing is going to get higher. They say that there's a stronger dollar, which is going to decrease manufacturing. They also say there's going to be weakened global trade because of Brexit. If they're willing to work with us on an infrastructure bill that's going to prime up this economy, we're willing to do it.
If you got a forecast, Brad?
Yeah, it takes 2 to tango now in Washington. Republicans are going to be pragmatic. We'll work with you where we can. The problem is, as what was pointed out, is there's no incentive apparently for Democrats to do that. I think if you win, you lose in 2020 because you don't realize that a short-term win doesn't necessarily mean that's going to continue.
This is the calculation. Before we go, just want to share a moment for you. The outgoing House Speaker, Paul Ryan, tweeted this. He said, an old friend dropped by to ask for directions to his new office. And here is the embrace of Mitt Romney in the Speaker's office on Capitol Hill. How about that, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, we forgot it. We forgot Mitt Romney's now in the Senate. With all the craziness, that's kind of a fun and interesting story right there.
It's not the Senate anymore. The Senate, we're going to have a healthy majority. It's in the House. And if the House, which is now going to be run by Democrats, hopefully by Nancy Pelosi, because, you know, she's a has-been.
Listen, I thought the line from Mike Lee last hour was pretty cute. He likes to call Mitt Romney Jr. anytime he's the junior senator from Utah. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Tim.
All right, thank you, A-Team. We'll see you again. Breaking news out of the Justice Department. We are now hearing the DOJ has issued an opinion supporting Acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker. We will bring that to you in just a few moments.
Also awaiting the arrival of Defense Secretary James Mattis at the U.S. southern border. Where do things stand with that caravan of illegal immigrants? We'll put that question to Texas AG Ken Paxton. He is our guest live, coming up right here.
Game on. I mean, I think the administration is ready. building the infrastructure and the fencing. You got a lot more inspectors and asylum officers down there from CIS ready to start these interviews.
An issue of a memo a moment ago in support of Matthew Whitaker to be the acting attorney general. This, the opinion issued today, supports the president's decision to appoint Whitaker acting AG. It points to the Federal Vacancies Reform Act of 1998, saying that the DOJ's Office of Legal Counsel had advised President Trump that he could appoint a senior DOJ official such as Mr. Whitaker to the post. Mr. Sessions resigned about a week ago today at the urging of the president. That's similar, Sandra, to the case that Mercedes Schlapp was making on our network just yesterday.
Really interesting the way they lay this all out. The opening line of the opinion of the Office of the Legal Counsel says the president appointed Whitaker under the Federal Vacancies Reform Act of 1998 and further reveals, and this is the quote, this office previously had advised that the president could designate a senior Department of Justice official such as Mr. Whitaker as an acting attorney general. Under the plain terms of the Vacancy Reform Act, he had been serving in the Department of Justice at a sufficiently senior pay level for over a year. It goes on to very clearly lay out its case. And one important fact here, that when looking at this, the Office of Legal Counsel had to go all the way back to 1866 to find another instance where a non-Senate confirmed individual sat as acting attorney general.
So there's this phrase, principal officer, that's been coming up in these legal arguments. And essentially what the lawyers will argue is whether they support that under his political history or not. This is what they argue. Although the Attorney General is a principal officer, it does not follow that an acting Attorney General should be understood to be one. So therein lies your argument. This debate we had yesterday, Sandra, with Michael Mukasey, the former Attorney General, on one side of this argument, and Andy McCarthy and others on the other side throughout our broadcast yesterday. So interesting legal discussion on that.
Certainly. Now, this Defense Secretary James Mattis will soon arrive on the U.S. border in McAllen, Texas, to visit the troops that have been deployed there, soldiers, Marines there to support customs and border protection operations in anticipation of the migrants heading to the U.S., some of whom have reached Tijuana. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton joins us now live from Austin. Ken, thank you for your time this morning. Mattis going to meet with the troops at the border there as the migrants continue to make their way. What do you think the strategy is here, and what happens next?
Well, the fact that he's down there tells you a lot. I mean, they're very focused on this. This is a top priority for the Trump administration. They've been planning this ever since they knew the migrants were coming. And so they're just getting ready for whatever's coming their way.
What happens today with a meeting with James Mattis?
Well, I think he's just telling the troops, kind of laying the groundwork for what their role is. Obviously, they're not Border Patrol. They're not Customs Enforcement. They have a support role. They don't have a direct role in stopping.
What are they doing day to day?
You know, I think they're probably helping with reconnaissance and making sure that they know where the migrants are coming through. But they will not be there to stop them directly. They're just there to help find them, I believe.
So this first group of migrants, they are on their way, making it very clear that they are headed for the southern border. What does that confrontation eventually look like based on the way the president is setting things up on the border?
Well, it's interesting. We don't really know because we don't know where they're going exactly, and we don't know how spread out they're going to be or how many are going to make. You know, most of them still have a long way to go to get to the border. So we don't exactly know how that's going to play out. And that's why I think he's sent so many troops down there. That's why so many Border Patrol agents are down there. They're there to be prepared for whatever we have to deal with.
That one of these caravans was making its way toward Tijuana, Mexico, which would seem to fit the argument the White House is making, is that in order to claim asylum, you have to enter at a port of entry, which would be a port of entry in this case, would it not?
Yeah, I think that's accurate, and certainly that's what the president has directed the migrants to do, is go to a port of entry. That's the appropriate place to request asylum, and then they'll go through the normal process that's been set up to deal with asylum seekers.
The point is, if that's the case, then they're listening to U.S. policy as they move along this path, correct?
I think that's accurate, and I think that's the whole point of the president getting his message out early, is so that these people understand what the process is and that they follow our process.
So we've had a change in leadership, obviously, post-midterm elections. Democrats will now control the House. And there's a lot of discussion, a lot of debate about what that means for border security. Former ICE Director Tom Homan weighed in on that.
I think the House Appropriations, which will be under the control of the Democrats here soon, I think they're going to look to cut the ICE budget, which means they'll fund less beds, which equals less arrests and less deportations and more catch and release. I certainly think it's going to be a struggle with the House under Democratic control because they don't want immigration enforcement.
Ken, how do you think things will change now with Democratic control of the House?
Well, I am concerned about what he just talked about, that the Democrats will defund some of our border security. Obviously, for a border state like mine, that's disappointing because we have to deal with consequences, including increased crime. So hopefully that doesn't happen, but it would not surprise me if that's the route the Democrats take.
In your legal world, do you have a view on this Matthew Whitaker matter? I mean, I'm certain you just heard Sandra and me talking about the breaking news from the Department of Justice. What is your view?
My guess is that the Department of Justice and the President have really focused on this legal argument. They understand what they're dealing with. And my guess is in the end they'll prevail until they get an acting Attorney General.
Okay. Well, the acting AG is Whitaker at the moment, according to the White House and this administration.
Well, my guess is until he's replaced that he will be there until they're ready to replace him, if they ever decide they are.
Ken Paxton, thank you for your time. Good to have you on our program today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you. Have a great day.
And next hour, we'll have more on this with former ICE acting director Thomas Homan. We look forward to having him and have a lot more questions for him when he comes
In the meantime, back to Florida, and this recount continues. New problems, machines overheating, lawyers heading to court. Florida's former Secretary of State, Katherine Harris, oversaw the recount 18 years ago, and she's going to join us live in studio coming up next, Sam.
Plus, those California wildfires taking another devastating turn. 50 people now dead, many more still missing. No end in sight. New details on this straight ahead.
We are not out of the woods yet. We still have some incredibly tough conditions ahead of us.
News alert, the deadliest wildfire California has ever seen burning in the northern part of the state, but it is not the only one. The state is now in full crisis mode.
So far, 50 are dead, hundreds not accounted for. Some 9,000 firefighters working these flames north and south, day and night. National Guard's been deployed, and survivors can only guess about what life might be when they get back to normal. And that brings us today to our newsroom news feed.
And we begin with the wildfires raging in the American West.
Grim indications tonight that the death toll in California's wildfires will continue to rise as both ends of the state continue to burn.
Complete firestorm, where in every direction flames rage and there is no way out.
We watched cars melt, cars exploding, people running and screaming, hair on fire. I don't know how any of us got out of there.
This is the heartbreaking scene that awaits hundreds of those families.
Tonight's search operations are ramping up. About 130,000 acres have been burned. The fire is now just 35% contained.
Search crews are desperately searching for more than 200 missing people.
This is probably one of the most difficult tasks. It is going to be a long and arduous process.
Those who escaped the flames now dealing with the reality that their homes and some of their neighbors are gone.
This is beyond, any comprehension.
It's hard to wrap your head around it. I feel really blessed that my family and my friends got out, but a lot of people didn't.
Everybody has such a normal life everywhere else, but here, everyone's just going to work, and the sun is shining, and our life and our world is not.
That's the reality in Northern California, and it's what they're trying to prevent now in the South. And the worst news is in the
flames are still spreading.
Yeah, trying to gauge it from the north and the southern part of the state. What Jonathan Hunt said in Malibu last hour is that the winds have calmed down in that part of the state. But there are many questions now. The sun's coming up. It's 7:30 in the morning. You're getting up these mountain areas, and that's when things really start to kick.
So many still accounted for. First responders, firefighters still fighting those flames. We wish them the best, but it is a horrible situation still.
So we're watching that from California. We're watching this from Florida as well. 10:31 now.
We won't miss that deadline. It's too critical. We won't miss it. All the emphasis, all the focus is on me. But I have a great staff who takes on any task, and their job is to get it done. So regardless to whether I'm here or someone else is here, there is an excellent foundation to this office.
So Broward County election supervisor taking a lot of heat right now as the recount moves forward. In time for today's headliner who knows a lot about recounts. Katherine Harris, former Secretary of State in 2000 during the Bush versus Gore ordeal. And welcome back to New York, and thank you for being with us today as our headliner.
It's so wonderful to be with both of you.
So we're looking at what the law says about deadlines for tomorrow, Thursday, for Sunday over the weekend if it goes to a manual recount. Can those deadlines legally be moved?
This is the issue about the rule of law, which is so crucial. We were talking about it earlier. The rule of law actually restricts the arbitrary exercise of power by subordinating it to existing, well-defined law. And that's what they should focus on, the law. Now, the courts can enter. That's what happened to us in the recount, if you recall. I petitioned the Florida Supreme Court for a statewide recount, which would have changed the course of all that we went through in election 2000, and they refused. Now, if these courts change the law and extend the deadlines, we don't know what the unintended consequences can be.
Do you see this then, whether it's Palm Beach, whether it's Broward or somewhere else we haven't thought of yet, is it ultimately decided by the state Supreme Court in Tallahassee then?
It could go to the U.S. Supreme Court, as we saw before. But what's crucial is that they try to follow the existing law.
That was a national election. This is state election.
That is.
You're saying it could go to the U.S. Supreme Court.
I'm not an attorney. I don't know all of those legalities. But all I'm saying is what's crucial is that if they start taking it up in the court case, there are unintended consequences that occur. Those well-established laws have been written. They should follow those laws. And then next year, if they don't like it, they can change them. We had the model election reform after election 2000. So if there are situations where they don't agree that signatures should match with the mail-in ballots and what they have on record, that's fine. But they can't change it now.
But they're trying to change it now.
They can't change it now.
Gail Gitcho, advisor to Rick Scott, was on with us last hour, and she had this update for us. Listen.
Here's what we know so far. We know that those machines acted up, and we know that they are working on recounting those ballots that were part of the machine acting up. So the deadline still stands to be 3 p.m. tomorrow. So all of the ballots are expected to be counted by then. If the ballots are not counted by then we know that Florida law has a fallback, and that fallback would allow for the tally that stood before the recount started to be the actual tally.
Oh, you got all that?
That's the law.
Well, I mean, Rick Scott's team is clearly making the points. While the judge offered this extension, 3 p.m. tomorrow, Thursday, is still the standing deadline.
It is the standing deadline, and that is always the concern. The rule of law is crucial. Follow the existing law. Change what you don't like in the next legislative session. But everybody has to have the confidence that they can rely on existing law and not just arbitrarily what a court or someone else deems it to be.
Can you explain to our viewers how 65 counties can get it right and 2 cannot consistently?
Or perhaps one of those counties has been beleaguered by problems in the past as well. That's a concern. It's interesting, though, because everyone always talks about Florida.
Yeah.
But Florida is a purple state. We have close elections. I said earlier, it's not a constitutional crisis. It's a close race. We're going to have these close races. You're not going to have that in New York or California. You're going to have election problems in every state. You just don't hear about it because it's not going to turn an election.
What do we do? I mean, how does this get fixed? How do we not end up here again, Katherine?
We will have close races in Florida. We have elections laws that are sufficient to handle it, but we're going to continue to have close races in Florida, and maybe you'll see that in other states.
Do you think, you look at the margin between Ron DeSantis and Andrew Gillum, you look at the margin between Bill Nelson and Rick Scott, do you think Ron DeSantis is the next governor of Florida?
It will depend on the recount, but typically, elections are not overturned by recounts, but we'll see.
Well, you were dealing with 1,200 in 2000.
I cut down to 537.
About 537, which I think was what you certified the vote at on a Sunday, a wet, rainy Sunday night.
You were there, and you got it right. One of the few who did.
I appreciate that. Thank you for that.
But now they're funding all these boxes of ballots. I don't know. Maybe Al Gore will be elected. Who knows?
But you were dealing with 500 votes. They're dealing with several thousand votes here. I guess the question then becomes, can you successfully challenge and overcome that margin if you're Bill Nelson or Andrew Gillum?
So the reason there's a 0.5% automatic recount and a 0.25% manual recount is because the number of votes that are left and the under and over votes could technically override the margins. That's why those are automatically generated. That's why I said early on, you need to be patient with the process, because that is our existing law.
People are finding it really hard to believe that with technology today, things are overheating, machines are breaking down, and then the only people who can fix the machines aren't even there. They've got to put them on an airplane.
Yeah, well, they were not probably current with the equipment that they should have had at the time.
That's another issue. Brenda Snipes is under a lot of pressure right now. How would you describe, as you look back, the amount of pressure that was on you?
Well, it was extraordinary national focus at the time, but I don't really equate my pressure as compared with hers. I was Secretary of State. My role was simply to add up the votes in 67 counties and certify. Yes, we had to speak to election law, and we hired Republican and Democrat constitutional lawyers to come in and advise us. But it was just following the law and being able to communicate that. These actions in the past and present, we didn't have the same issues, so I can't really equate it.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
18 years later, Catherine Harris. You bet.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thanks.
Well, the stock market opening as oil prices continue to take a plunge. So how's Wall Street faring today? Not looking so bad. Now we're into trading.
Also, Amazon catching a lot of heat for their headquarters. Is that right? Some people like it, some people don't. We'll sort it out with the money man Charles Payne coming up in a moment here.
Pump you up. Charles Payne will join us now to talk about the stock market and the impact of all of this oil talk and the fact that oil prices keep on coming down. What does it tell you?
There's a few things. First of all, it's about America's now preeminence as an oil producer, right? You think about last week, we had 12 more rigs come online. We've been building inventory here. We have become a behemoth. It also, though, points to President Trump's insistence that OPEC and Saudi Arabia lower oil. What we learned just this morning from the CPI report is that gasoline prices were huge last month. President Trump kept hammering them and hammering them. And think back even on Monday when President Trump put out that tweet to Saudi Arabia to push oil even lower. Crude oil was $61. Yesterday hit like 55, 54. So very effective. We have a lot of people who make money in that industry, so we don't want it to get too low. But this is great news for the American consumer going into the holidays.
Why are we soft on the markets? What's up?
I think there's a new pattern in the market. Sell the rallies. There's still a lot of anxiety out there, a lot of unknowns, a lot of question marks. Before going on. There was a report put out at 10:30. It looks like that might have coincided with some selling on economic and security concerns vis-a-vis China, and also news coming out of Brexit. So we'll see. But some of this also is just the habit. We're testing this market. We're trying to find a bottom, and these things happen.
Let's throw up the New York Post cover today.
Why not, huh?
Here we go.
Here it is.
Queen's ransom. Amazon gets $2.5 billion tax break and right to a helipad to move to New York.
It's a great headline, by the way. Queen's not as good as Pistols at Dawn last Wednesday morning.
Yeah, but the Post is no joke when it comes to these.
This is getting a lot of talk here in Washington, D.C., Nashville, Tennessee, and New York City. What's your view on it?
I think this is a sign of corporate welfare. The sort of, I think what we did learn, though, is that New York State, New York City understand that they have put their economy is in such, economic peril in a sense of regulatory taxes that they felt they had to go this far. And no small business, no small entrepreneur can compete or grow this kind of business.
Here is the left-leaning Democratic mayor of New York City, Bill de Blasio, defending his decision on the contract.
We're going to have an opportunity here for tens of thousands of New Yorkers, everyday New Yorker. In this city now, that tech ecosystem is about 350,000 jobs. Just got a huge boost from Amazon's decision to come here. But we know that's only going to spark a lot more growth.
If I'm running this city or any major city, I want Amazon to come to my town.
Here's the irony.
But for how much money?
Right.
I know the irony. He's the same guy who raised the taxes and created the high regulatory environment.
But he also explained why he got played. He just told us he got played because Amazon had to come to New York. Remember, initially, headquarters 2.0 was going to be one city, 50,000 people. They looked around the country. They said there's not one city that has that many talented workers.
It's human capital they're looking for.
So guess what? The number one city in America, in the metro area right now and in this country for tech workers, New York City. I got a 320 number here. The mayor said 350. Guess what number two is? Washington, D.C. Guess which two metro areas were picked? New York City and Washington, D.C.
is they were coming here anyway.
Right.
My point is they need the human capital.
Of course they need the human capital.
They need the talent that's here, so why give them the incentives on the tax break?
That's the point.
De Blasio's arguing over 10 years, it's in writing, they have to fulfill 25,000 jobs.
There's some
Do you believe
performance
that or
issues
not?
there, but they will be here, and I think they will get around all of that. There's also $350 million in cash. My problem is, if you're a small entrepreneur, would-be entrepreneur in New York City, he just showed you why it's hard to grow a business, why it's hard to be someone. If you're not backed by venture capital money, they just told you the barriers, the hurdles are way too high, and that's why everyone who's not associated with this are being kicked out of this city. Or you've got massive gentrification. People
Gosh,
who can
I wish you
afford
had
to live
something
in
to
their
say
neighbors
on that.
What do you
being
think?
pushed out. So anyway,
What do you think?
I think he got played.
What do you mean, what do I think?
Well, here's
I
my
am pro-business. I am pro-business. I'm pro-small business, and I'm pro-big
I guess
business.
at what cost? All these democratically elected members of Congress from the boroughs of New York City, look at the percentage of their vote that they picked up last Tuesday. It's 88, 89, 92, 95% of the vote. Those are Saddam Hussein numbers.
Right.
I mean, where do you go to get that?
Listen, it is what it is. I just worry about common people in New York City who have been pushed out of this town, who would like an opportunity. I wish there was the same. Listen, if you're going to go this much.
You know what? You want more of this? 2 p.m. Fox Business
Check it out. Your point is they were going to come here anyway.
Oh,
Well,
absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you. Sanders got some news here. From the Hill we go.
A picture for you. Newly elected members of the House of Representatives gathering for their class photo on the steps of the Capitol. This was expected, and earlier we saw Mitch McConnell with Mitt Romney and Rick Scott and Marsha Blackburn, and this is the big day on the Capitol, and here is the photo opportunity of the new class.
You have a lot of Democrats in there, too. You picked up, what was the last number? Was it 32 seats? 32 seats on the House side. They're going to have a comfortable majority, not an overwhelming majority, but it's going to be anywhere between 10 and 15 seats in the end. And they were still calling seats in California last night, seats where Hillary Clinton won in 2016. But a Republican had controlled the district at the congressional level, and some of those have now flipped.
So the House freshmen gathering on the steps of the Capitol for a class picture this morning. That happening now.
Story, 50 are dead, at least many more unaccounted for, thousands of homes destroyed, wildfires north and the southern part of California. Scott Lauder's the former mayor in the town of Paradise, a town that's been wiped out this week. Currently a councilman. He's by telephone with us. Sir, our best to you and everybody out there. Just can't imagine what you're looking at. You told us in the commercial break you're about 90 minutes south of Paradise, but you've been going back into the town just about on a daily basis. Take our viewers through what you see of your town of Paradise.
Well, Paradise we're in the Sierra foothills. Our elevation runs from about 1,500 feet up to about 2,200 feet, and then on into the unincorporated area of Magalia. And so our base of operations for all the fires and our emergency operations center is in Chico, California, home of Sierra Nevada beer. So I'm saying south of that, between Davis and Woodland, about 90 minutes away, where the air is a little bit better, but the air quality, as you can imagine, is just horrendous. Everywhere you go, people are wearing their masks, their N95 masks. They're handing them out at community centers and hospitals and grocery stores. I went into Costco yesterday, and they were handing them out at the front door with a bottle of water because it's important to stay hydrated. But when you get up into Paradise and as a city official, fire personnel, law enforcement personnel can take us in there to tour through it. I've also, with my son, Dustin, and friends, we're working with the North Valley Animal Disaster Group, and we're rescuing koi from koi ponds where they've lost the power. They need the aeration, and they don't need to be fed generally in the wintertime when it's a little bit cooler. But we're trying to get them out. We've got a big tank that we put in a truck and with an aerator, and taking them out and taking them down to UC Davis and to the Department there of Fisheries and Aquaculture, where they'll care for them and check them out.
Scott,
So we're going in to do 3 launches today.
You've lived in Paradise for over 17 years.
Yeah, I've been in Paradise for 20 years. I own a movie theater there, and we're very fortunate. The theater was saved by some of the firefighters, but while everything else around it burned. But it was a place where they chose to make a stand because of the large parking lot, that they could protect people that were sheltering in place. And so the best thing to do was to fight the fire on the back side that was approaching the theater. And they saved the theater and a bank in the corner, and in fact saved all the buildings on the corner, because when they have a lot of paving and stuff and concrete, that's the safest place for people to be.
The video is just devastating to see. I can't imagine what it looks like in person, sir. Our best to you and everybody in your community. Scott Lauder's the former mayor there in Paradise, California.
Yeah, and
Glad your
thank you so much for your interest.
Yeah.
And if people want to help with the animals, NVADG, that's the North Valley
Scott, thank
Animal
you.
Disaster Group.
Best to you and your family.
We'll
be back.
Donations.
Thank you.
Scott Lauder, thank you. We'll be right back.